not again. Um, because it's ridiculous. I want to put a plea out there to all white people. Please let go of the guilt. But it is hugely patronizing to say to a black boy, obviously you can't possibly access Shakespeare in the way that a white child can. Shakespeare understood that. We need to learn from Shakespeare. We're the ones with a problem with race, not Shakespeare.
Hello and welcome to Spectator TV. I'm John Connolly, the Spectator's news editor. This week brought the news that the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, which manages properties of the bards in Stratford-upon-Avon, is planning to decolonise its collections to hit out at the British Empire. Does the bard need decolonising? Joining me to discuss is Katharine Birbalsingh, the head of the Michaela Community School, which is one of the best performing schools in the country. Katharine, thank you for joining us on Spectator TV. What did you make when you first saw that the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust is attempting to decolonise its collection?
I thought they'd never get here, but they have eventually. I always thought that Shakespeare was untouchable, but I always used to think, I bet he's not. And of course, here we go again, which is, of course, what most of the British public think, when every time it's just not again, because it's ridiculous. Shakespeare is yet again another dead white man, and we are attacking them all of the time, and we are destroying our culture. We're lucky enough to have inherited this extraordinary literary, artistic, historical culture, which newer countries like Australia or Canada and so on would kill for, and yet we just want to throw it out the window.
And why do you think that is? What do you think is the motivation behind things like this?
Yeah, well, that's what's so fascinating, which is obviously to do with race. That was really brought to the forefront in 2020 with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, and the guilt that white people feel. And, I want to put a plea out there to all white people. Please let go of the guilt. I'm begging you all, please let go of the guilt, because this guilt is going to destroy the West. It's going to destroy our schools. And we don't understand the damage that it's doing. And let me explain what I mean. So a white person, and I'm not blaming white people, I get it. They're made to feel guilty by the media that is around this, by the history that exists. And they feel somehow that the guilt is inherited, that because their ancestors did X, Y, and Z, that means they did those things. And that isn't true. They haven't. And what we then become, we're in an age of identity politics where everything becomes performative. So you're not allowed to just not be a racist. Once upon a time, when I was growing up, you wanted to not be a racist. Nowadays, not being a racist isn't good enough. You have to be an anti-racist. So Ibram X. Kendi, Robin DiAngelo, all those people in America have pushed this idea that if you're not a racist, you are actually a racist, that you've got to be an anti-racist. Now, being an anti-racist, what that means is to be performative in the way that you demonstrate that you are not a racist. So it means putting a black box up on Instagram. It means telling everybody that you're doing anti-bias training. It's all about how you show that you are not a racist, as opposed to trying to be a decent person. Because, look, we're all flawed. We're human beings. We show elements of unkindness. We show elements of lack of generosity. We show elements of meanness sometimes, selfishness, and so on. And sometimes we show elements of racism. And in the early 21st century, 2003, 4, 5, and so on, there was a play called Avenue Q. It was a musical theater thing. And they had a great song. You can Google it, called Everyone's a Little Bit Racist. And it was this great Muppet show. And in those days, we can make fun of this sort of thing. Everyone's a little bit racist, but we're not committing hate crimes. That's what's in the piece. It's really fun. Nowadays, nobody would dare do that because we're not allowed to admit that everybody's a little bit racist, and it's not a big deal. It's okay. Now, that doesn't mean that serious racism isn't a big deal. It is. But sometimes when you make a little assumption about something, or it's something to check, it's something to think, oh, am I being a little bit racist? But it's not something to be thinking, oh my goodness, how can I perform on Facebook and on Instagram by telling everybody, look how I'm not a racist, or by decolonizing Shakespeare's birthplace, because I think this is all about the performance. It's all about white people feeling guilty and saying, I need to tell everybody that I'm not part of that group of racists over there. I'm different. Therefore, I believe in decolonizing Shakespeare's birthplace. Therefore, I believe in decolonizing schools, libraries, in making sure that we remove the canon that we used to have in the literature that we would teach our children, that we don't teach British history anymore, that we move to teaching a very different sort of history because we are so guilty. And this, I think, is doing great harm to the nation. It harms both white people and ethnic minorities, and it definitely harms race relations, because it means that whenever anything is talked about when it comes to race, and when there are really serious racial issues happening in the country, nobody takes it seriously because everybody just thinks, oh my goodness, they roll their eyes, not again.
I wanted to take you up, Catherine, on that point about sort of harming ethnic minorities as well. So one of the ways the Birthplace Trust justifies this move is saying it's all about getting sort of underrepresented communities into the museum and enjoying Shakespeare. But the sort of implication of that is that the only way ethnic minorities can enjoy Shakespeare is through the sort of decolonization frame. I mean, your schools, as we know, probably quite ethnically diverse. So is that something you found yourself, that the only way to get diverse students involved in Shakespeare is through decolonization?
It is so patronizing. So this is the other thing, that all these white, well-meaning, they are well-meaning white people, okay? So I understand they mean well, right? But it is hugely patronizing to say to a black boy, obviously, you can't possibly access Shakespeare in the way that a white child can. We need to do it differently for you because of the color of your skin. Listen, I have been teaching children of all colors for over 25 years. We do 4 Shakespeare plays at our school. We do them in depth. The kids understand Shakespearean language. Our children are from a variety of backgrounds. You know, every possible, it's like United Nations. Every, you know, their parents and their grandparents and so on are from all over the place.
Mm.
And we have every possible religion. It's amazing. Okay. Now, every single one of them can access Shakespeare. They can access Shakespeare when the teacher is really passionate about it, when the teacher is able to break down their explanations and build up the scaffolding that they need and get them to understand it. And once the children understand it, they can then read it and enjoy it. And they enjoy it because Shakespeare is universal.
Mm.
Shakespeare speaks to all of us because he talks about the human condition, what it is to feel jealousy and anger and experience death and birth and so on. All of these ideas that Shakespeare encompasses, which he has been doing for over 400 years. Like, the key thing about Shakespeare is that he has been influencing literature for over 400 years. Maya Angelou, when she first read Shakespeare, thought to herself, surely Shakespeare must have been a black woman because he understands my plight. That is what she thought. And she thought that because Shakespeare speaks to us all. And the main thing that people don't understand about dead white men, they go, dead white man, oh my goodness, we've got to get rid of them. And my thing about dead white men is, the most important thing about them is not the fact that they are men and not the fact that they are white, but the fact that they are dead. Right? That is why we're interested in that. They are dead. I don't care if they're men. I don't care if they're white. Shakespeare has been dead for 400 years. He is an extraordinary author and he has been influencing literature for 400 years. Therefore, the Maya Angelou's of this world would not exist without him. Now, that doesn't mean you can't read Maya Angelou, but it does mean that when you're a 12-year-old, you need to begin somewhere.
Mm.
And having a thorough understanding of Shakespeare gives you the foundations that are required to be able to move beyond that. So obviously at university, clearly they need to be doing a whole variety of literature, and even at A level, fine. But the canon needs to be protected. And one of the things I worry about with Bridget Phillipson in Post and the very far left leanings that she has with regard to the changes that she is making to the bill that she's pushing through Parliament quietly right now, is that they are going to decolonize our curriculum, not just ours, everybody across the nation. They are going to reduce the standards of what is required. both by decolonizing and by just reducing standards. My prediction is that the Progress 8 measure that is currently being used will be changed. It will be altered to make sure that academic subjects that are difficult are not promoted above other subjects, which has been the case so far. And I suspect that the decolonization, look, if you want to decolonize and bring in Chinua Achebe, Nigerian author who's very hard to read, fine. But if you bring in Benjamin Zephaniah instead, you are reducing the standards that the children have to reach. The fact is that, one, there is the standards argument, then there is the argument around, but this is British. Shakespeare should be untouchable. And this is now the decolonization process that has been happening across the country for so long now. It's been going for so long. They are now even touching Shakespeare. What does it even mean to decolonize his birthplace? It's completely ridiculous. You know, the fact is, Shakespeare is extraordinary. We should leave him alone. We should teach it to all children of all colors. We should do it in the same way, whether they are brown, black, or white. Kids are kids. This idea that white kids are different from black kids, it's not true. All children can access Shakespeare. It does not matter what color they are. And I don't know why in 2025 I'm having to explain this, but unfortunately, identity politics have moved us into a post-age now of racism, where actually anti-racism is racism. Not being racist is not being racist. Being anti-racist turns you into a performing seal, which means you're then thinking about race all the time. When in fact, what you want to do is not be thinking about race all the time and thinking of children as just children, whatever color or religion they are.
It's so fascinating to hear that the Maya Angelou quotes that you mentioned, and to sort of contrast it what the Trust has been saying, which is supposedly the custodian of Shakespeare. So this decolonization process follows a research project from 2022, which kind of argued that the idea of Shakespeare's universal genius benefits the ideology of white European supremacy.
Look, the thing is that my understanding of race is actually quite nuanced and interesting. I am not saying that there's no such thing as racism. And I'm not even saying that the only types of racism are people who put excrement through your door. I actually think that racism is quite complex and demonstrates itself in various ways. I would actually argue that the people who are so worried about all of this race stuff are partly doing that because they have a problem with race, is what I'd say. So when they're saying white supremacy, it's now become synonymous with Western supremacy. So what we mean by that is anything Western means if you want to promote something Western, you're promoting white supremacy. If you want to promote British history over some African history, that's white supremacy. If you want to promote Shakespeare over a black author, that's white supremacy. When actually, maybe it's just because we value the culture and the history of the West, and we want to promote that with our children. And what that then reveals, and this is what I mean about race being complex, what that then reveals is the people who are making these decisions genuinely don't believe that black and brown people can be British and can be a real part of the West. I feel I am just as Western as you. I am just as British as you. And because I believe that, I believe that it is my children's birthright here to be able to be taught Shakespeare in the way that any white child would. And this idea that ethnic minorities cannot access this unless it's somehow been painted with the brush of decolonization, as if somehow we're going to get poisoned by Shakespeare if it's not done. There's nothing different. You and I are the same. As Shylock talked about, does a Jew not bleed? Does a Jew not fail? Does a Jew not? Yes, we are all the same. You prick us and we bleed. That is just, look, for goodness sakes, Shakespeare understood that. We need to learn from Shakespeare. We're the ones with a problem with race, not Shakespeare. And honestly, it outrages me because I know that right now, Bridget Phillipson Bill, she's changing the curriculum. Right now, there is a curriculum body trying to figure out how they should change the curriculum. I know that there is only one ethnic minority in that group. And that ethnic minority guy is the guy who's fighting for the canon. He's the one fighting for Shakespeare. And all the white people on that group are saying, no, we need to decolonize. What we all need to realize is that it is guilty whites who are pushing this agenda, okay? And too often, I found this with Hamid Patel's appointment to the chair of Ofsted. This, by the way, you've never known who another chair of Ofsted has been. The reason why is because it's an irrelevant post. Nobody cares. What matters is the chief of inspector. He's the guy who runs Ofsted. Amanda Spielman. Every chief inspector you have heard of before. And the reason you've heard of them and you haven't heard of the chair is that it's irrelevant. It's a 2-day post per week, and it's for 5 months. He's in an interim post, totally insignificant. And yet people see his face come up and they go, oh my goodness, this is a real problem.
Katharine, we should probably give a little bit of background here, which is that Sir Hamid Patel, he's the head of a big academy chain in the UK, which includes lots of Islamic schools, but also some non-Islamic schools. And he's been appointed the temporary chair of Ofsted. Is that right?
Yes. And the chair of Ofsted.
And there has been some backlash because the way he presents himself in particular suggests he's a pretty observant Muslim.
Well, you say that. That's one photo. When I met him, he was just in Western clothes.
Fair enough.
The fact is, they throw around that photo and everybody goes mad. The fact is, he's just a brown guy like me. And he's a guy who's done an amazing job with schools. And they've put him in there for a few months. It's no big deal. But everybody goes mad. And I kind of get it. I get why they go mad. Because they're going mad for the same reason that they're going mad over decolonization of Shakespeare's Birthplace. They're looking at that and going, oh my goodness, not again. And I get that. I do get that. But the fact is that he's an excellent practitioner who's in there for a little while. The people we need to be worried about are on that curriculum body. The people we need to worry about are the ones like Bridget Phillipson who feel guilty about their whiteness, and they are then going to decolonize our curriculum. So then when your children are coming home and they're not being taught Shakespeare, it has nothing to do with Hamid Patel or me or the person who's arguing on that group who's another ethnic minority. We are the ones arguing for the canon. We are the ones that the whites will not listen to because the whites are so desperate to perform in such a way to demonstrate that they're not racist. We don't have that feeling. We're not thinking we have to demonstrate how we're not racist. In fact, we're actually arguing for British culture, Western history, for all the things that you know and love at the Spectator. You know, unfortunately, not everybody thinks like this. We need to deal with the source, which is the white guilt. Now, look, I'm not saying there are black people out there and brown people out there pushing a different narrative, like Ibram X. Kendi and those like him. So I get that, but we need to ignore those people. We need to fight for what is ours, and what is ours is Britain. Britain belongs to you just as it belongs to my kids. Shakespeare belongs to you just as he belongs to my kids. And the only way that we can all come together in the multicultural country that we've got and live in harmony together is if we share our history and share our artists and our writers as if they belong to all of us, and to stop seeing white supremacy everywhere, because anytime any one of us wants to promote the West, you then get accused of white supremacy. It isn't white supremacy. It's simply Western supremacy, which we live in the West. Obviously, we think the West is great. It would be weird if we didn't.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Katharine.
Thank you for having me.